皆様いよいよですね、シアスターゲイツ展が24日に始まりました。24日、昨日ですよね。で、一昨日内覧会をしまして、昨年は森美術館20周年ということで、2本の記念展を開催いたしましたけれども、今年その新しい21年目の森美術館ということで、シアスターゲイツを皆さんにお届けできることを、大変嬉しく思っています。具体的に、カレンダーに落とし込んでやりましょうというふうになったのは、国際芸術祭愛知2022が終わってから森でそろそろ個展をやりましょうかということになったんですけれども、それまで何度となくいろいろな形で、シアスターゲイツを日本に紹介できないかなというふうに思っていたので、本当に実現して、夢のようだと思っています。もうほとんどミラクルだったと思っていますけれども、その間にブラックアートへの関心も大変世界中で高まっていますけれども、単にその流行っているから日本で見せようということもなかなか難しく、どういうふうに日本のオーディエンスに関係性を感じてもらえるのかというところでは、今回の展覧会のタイトルにもなっているアフロ民芸ということで、日本人自身が民芸について改めて考える機会になるとともに、そことの接続によってアフリカン・アメリカンカルチャーについて学ぶ機会になるということが、大変意味があることだなというふうに思っていました。ただ、そうしたそのアイデンティティの問題を超えて、このシアスター・ゲイツというアーティストがですね、本当に型破りでつかみどころがなく、私はもうつかめないうなぎのような人だと思ってるんですけどなので、そうしたそのアーティストの全貌を少しでも展覧会を通して、皆さんに伝えられるといいなと思っていますが、トークも、歌も上手ですがトークも大変上手なので、今日は本人から話を聞いていただいて、私とそれからメインで担当した徳山と一緒に質問をちょっと後でしながらディスカッションしていただきたいと思っています。どうぞお楽しみください。
Good to see you all. Thanks for coming. Can I show some images? It's good to be here. This exhibition has been in the making for 20 years, I guess. When I first came to Tokoname, I felt like maybe I was the second or third black person to ever come to Tokoname. And I felt that way because camera crews from Nagoya would follow me home. They would record me riding my bike. And they were like, look at the day in the life of this potter from America. But there were other potters who were riding home. They didn't get followed by the camera crews from the Nagoya television station. I felt my difference, but being different didn't feel bad. It was like the beginning of a conversation. And people struggled to, they didn't just say Gaijin or something. They said, Africano America Gendes. They were trying to find ways to qualify how I was differently American. And I think the exhibition is also trying to look at the ways in which people have misunderstood Americans. I was very interested in the relationship between these negative imaginary understandings of black people and then other images that were more dignified, that were more celebratory, that showed the power of culture. Not only black culture, but to be black in America, which was different from being black in Ghana or different from being black in Nigeria. But to be black in America felt like it was something particular because I was obviously American when I would go to Ghana. I was American. When I would go to South Africa, I was American. Next, please. ありがとうございます。 over the years, I would have these encounters that were different from my normal experience. And then these encounters would come to shape who I am. And one of the biggest encounters was going to Tokoname and doing the same things in Tokoname that I did in the United States, but doing it with a totally different people, with totally different values, in a different landscape, with a different work ethic. Being a potter in Japan was different than being a potter in America. And it meant that I was two potters. I was an American potter, and I was all the things that I was learning in Tokoname. And I think that I became super interested in how what I was learning in a workshop environment might be translated to others in the United States in a workshop environment. Like, could I bring the Japanese workshop to Chicago? And those values that I felt so strongly, could I share them with others? And it's like, well, what are those values? It's like, oh, people work hard and they don't brag about it. People work hard because they want to get better at the thing that they're doing. People want to get better at what they do because getting better is good. And it's not like you get better to make more money. You make more objects to be more popular. You give things to people because you want to have sex or whatever. But you get good to be good. Over time, I've found myself then trying to marry the things that were from the different parts of me. So this work called Afro-Ikebana was maybe the first work that was the first object, the first installation that was trying to get at what this marriage might look like. The African object that we are looking at is actually not an African object. It's a shovel head carved in clay and some arms and a circle and all fused together in bronze. But it is not Bantu, it's not Fang, it's a suggestion of the African in the same way that that vessel might be a suggestion of the Korean and the tatami might be a suggestion of the Japanese. And together, they make something that make us feel something that is different from if only a black artist thinking about black things or a Japanese person thinking about Japanese things or a Korean person thinking about Korean things, different from those separate things. And even these notions of nature and randomness and composition and how things fit in the world, I feel very much like the way that I hang a show or install my works, in some kind of way, it's loosely related to philosophies that I learned not when I was studying Old Testament or New Testament, not when I was studying Fluxus or Dada or Suprematism. It was when I was studying other things. When I was looking at the flat Chinese paintings, the 1300s, or when I was thinking about the philosophies of Taoism, or when I was trying to understand what someone meant by the beauty of irregularity. And the idea of irregularity meant that I was fighting with Western curators who wanted to put pots in a straight line and put them all on the same size plinth. And they would say, oh, these pots, they deserve a high standing, so they should all be high and they should all have the light right on them. And I'm like, no, they should be like pebbles in a garden. And if they're pebbles in a garden, they should be totally random. And the experience that you have of pebbles in a garden is natural. And I want something more natural than I do mechanical. That didn't feel Western, right? Maybe there's nothing about this image that is Japanese, but the encounter of philosophy, religion, culture, friendship in some way was changing how I laid things out. So I decided to kind of lean into this idea of Afro-Mingei. And maybe even I tried like making Afro-Mingei into like a brand. Like, well, what would it look like if it was a religion? That could be interesting, Afro-Mingei religion. But what would it look like if it was like clothing? Or what would it look like if it was a bar? And so I decided to make an Afro-Mingei bar in Houston, in Dallas. And it was like, what is an Afro-Mingei menu? And it was like, I keep calling it a proposal because it's a proposal. You know, and I could ask other people, what would an Afro-Mingei menu look like? In the first gallery, I was trying to deal with the ways in which emptiness registers as sacred. Pay homage to the thing that I love most about Tokoname, which is its people and its clay. And so this work by Mr. Koide is the kind of summation of a person who is not from a place. I'm not from Tokoname. I'm not Japanese. But I love so much collecting things, caring for things, being curious about masses of things. And when I realized that Mr. Koide's life's work needed a friend, or needed like a champion, needed a storage space, needed a house, needed a home, I became really excited that I could steward his 16,000 vessels. But I feel like in the same way that I was trying to honor my father in the first room by having Hirano-san, Ohara-san, Mizukami-san, Koide-sons, by having their work with me at Mori, I'm also able to honor them. So when I think about Mingei, I think about drinking. I think about like, oh, my friend likes to drink, I'll make him a pot. Oh, if my friend likes to drink, I'll make him a cup. I'll make an interesting vessel for pouring drinks between him and his friends. I'll make a special vessel for pouring between him and his partner. And this installation is like an acknowledgement of the fact that people like to drink in Japan. Bimbo Tokuri. With help from friends in Shigaraki, we were able to aggregate 1,000 Bimbo Tokuri, and then imagine that the Bimbo Tokuri could continue to be used. So we refired them. We put a new brand on them. We want to fill them up and make them available again. And it's like this kind of ongoing reactivation. accepting that the old things still have something to offer us, and that I don't need to make new things in order to be an artist. I can work with the truths that are around me. So I'm thankful for all my friends, and I'll just run through them. This is the Hakudo Sake Company, Sawada-san. Next one, please. I want to thank Hori Tea. Next, in Kyoto, please. And friends of mine who have been making incense for the Buddhists for probably 400 years, Shoyedo. And they make cool incense for everyday use. And our friends at Mizuno in Tokoname. And these are all collaborators whose work you see poetically somewhere in the exhibition. Thanks to Sansui, who gave us so much wood. And, all of these, I knew that the exhibition for me would be an opportunity to try to partner into the future with these companies. And so I feel like the exhibition is actually like an introduction to the kinds of partnerships I hope to develop with great artists. And Masataki-san, Hoso Textiles. Yeah, that's my friend Reijiro. He runs the Urasenke Tea School in Kyoto. I really, in a way, this exhibition was a kind of exploration and a celebration of things and people, things that I love and people who I love. And I hope you guys enjoy the exhibition. Thanks so much for coming tonight.
Can we ask some questions? I thought it'd be nice for you to maybe tell us a little bit about one of the first combination of African, American, and Japanese, like Yamaguchi Institute.
So in 2004, I came to Tokoname for the first time. In 2007, I was offered an exhibition, and I wanted to try to celebrate what I was learning, because I was starting to do a lot of wood fire, like a kind of anagama kiln, like a makigama. I was using traditional Japanese techniques to make ceramics. And so I created a fiction, Shoji Yamaguchi, Shoji from Hamada Shoji, and Yamaguchi, the region of Hagi. And I shared this as a kind of fiction, that there was a guy who moved to Mississippi, and a Japanese guy moved to Mississippi, married a black woman. I encountered them, and that's how I learned ceramics. And I showed my ceramics, attributing my ceramics to this Japanese guy, Shoji Yamaguchi. And everyone believed that my ceramics were made by Shoji Yamaguchi. They were pretty good. But it seemed like they were more excited that they were made by someone foreign or from far, far away than they would have been excited to know that I made them. So I took advantage of their fetishistic interest in Japan to make my Japanese pots so that I would become famous and people would think my art was interesting. And then I told everybody that I made the pots. And at first, some didn't believe me. They were like, these are Japanese. They say that they're from 1850. And I'm like, they say that they're from 1850 with the numbers 1850. I don't think Japanese folk were writing 1850 in 1850. But that that was my way of trying to create an encounter, a sincere encounter using fiction to tell the story of my truth.
I think it's interesting, something that you started to make this fiction of this marriage of African American and Japanese culture, and that was 2007. So now, nearly 20 years, like 18, 17 years later, it's really coming into reality. So you were saying yesterday that you kind of talk about the future, which is not happening, but as a fiction, but a fiction started as a fiction, but now becoming a reality. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more?
This is actually a little bit of a complicated question. Not that the question is that my answer feels complicated, because I didn't know what my future life would be with Tokoname, or I didn't imagine myself as a contemporary artist, so I couldn't have imagined Mori Museum. I didn't spend time in Tokyo in the early 2000s. I would just fly to Nagoya, go straight to, or fly to wherever, Narita, and go straight to Tokoname. So I didn't even really have Tokyo as a kind of center. Tokoname was the center. So in that sense, I feel like I was projecting what it might be like to be a great potter one day, or to be more disciplined than I was. And what happened was, when Yamaguchi was a fiction that I created. But then Yamaguchi would tell me to do things like, you have to make pots every day for 8 hours. And then when Yamaguchi told me to make pots for 8 hours, I would make them. And then Yamaguchi would say, your pots are not good. They need to be better. And then I tried to make the pots better because Yamaguchi told me the pots should be better. So in a way, Yamaguchi was no longer a fiction while I was making the work. I had created a sensei, and that I would then commit to the tenets of my sensei. I think I needed a master. I needed some rules, and nobody was around me giving me rules, so I made up a master who could give me rules. And some artists might say, like, I created parameters for myself, or I gave myself a schedule, but I gave myself a master. And that feels very much related to, like, how mechanisms of spirituality work. You read that book. The book says do this, you do this devoutly. The book says don't do that, you don't do that. And it's like a kind of, the invisible world is telling the material world how to live. And then if you do it, you find your life either better or happier or simpler or not. I think to go from Yamaguchi to Afro-Mingei is a kind of, it's the evidence that blackness, in addition to my Americanness, was always important, and that over time, the truth of Japan became more interesting than the fiction of Japan.
Very interesting. For the Afro-Mingei, you always mention that the Black is Beautiful movement and the Mingei, the Mingei as kind of the act of the resistance. It's kind of key connection between those two movements. So could you explain a bit more about this?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this over the last couple days. We could say that the Mingei movement was about craft and craftsmen and craftsmanship and the beautiful. But that would be very narrow. that Mingei, if you unpack it, Mingei was also used by the government to try to keep gendered norms the same as they had been in the old days in the old country. Like, women stay at home, shut your mouth, do your work, everything's good. Right? So Mingei, okay, craft, but it was also being used in different ways to shape ideologies about home life, to shape ideologies about work life, to construct a self. Mingei initially was about how men collect and think together and use precious objects to demonstrate their intellectual veracity, their intellectual prowess. Yeah. Well, can you imagine when normal, middle-class women had an opinion about craft objects? So in that sense, Mingei is a kind of, right, in the same way Black is Beautiful is a movement, but often in the movement, men were put in front and smart women who were writing the speeches of interesting and charismatic men, they were never known. They were the unknown intellectual class of Black is Beautiful. And it's reasonable that women were throwing and glazing and firing alongside men who put their names on things. So, in that sense, both movements had complexities. But if we think about how great it is, how important it is that we try to protect the good parts of the culture that we've created, and how important it is to try to preserve historical objects when the values of a place, the values of our nation are changing so quickly. I remember going to Suzhou in China, and Suzhou had a market. And in Suzhou, you could go to like the wood market, and you could get all of the shoji, like wooden screens. Like nobody, all these, whole towns were being torn down in China. And so Suzhou was the place where materials would end up. It would be miles and miles of old buildings, Nobody wants shoji screens anymore. They're not insulated. You can't see out. The kids break them. The dog's gonna, jump through the shoji screen. And so as a result, nobody needs minowashi, right? And so there's a direct relationship between our changing interest in architecture and the usefulness of a town. And so it means that if we're not going to use minowashi for shoji screens, is there another way to use minowashi? I think in that sense, I've been trying to grapple with, what Mingei helps us do is remember that we've made great things in the past. And that those great things, maybe they need a future use or a future trajectory, but we've been great. We don't need Germanic paper, mass produced, Yeah, so I think that I hold on to the romantic parts of Mingei because I want to hold on to making things by hand and making things and remembering that those things were made by my mama and my grandmother and my great-grandmother. It's a way of keeping their legacies alive.
In addition to this handwork story, I wonder if you could tell us about this your collaboration with Prada and Bottega, because some people asked why is he collaborating with this high brand, and what does it mean as Afro-Mingei?
Yeah, I love that. You know, I think Sansui is a high brand, but no one knows them. So if we're gonna embrace craftsmanship, I think we should embrace it high and low. We should celebrate craftsmanship where it lives, and we should create opportunities so that the craft is no longer just in Tajimi or just in Honda or just in Gifu. It should go from Gifu, and it could go from Gifu to Bali to Tuscany. And it could end up in Tuscany, and my pot can be wrapped and braided and tied, and it could come back to Japan as something that's never been seen before. I was excited to make a kind of craft work in collaboration that had never been seen before. And I thought Bottega was a great company to do that with. And when I was thinking about tea ceremony, I was thinking about the shifuku kind of wrap, like for the chawan or for a vessel, the wrapping around the vessel. And what I wanted Prada to help me do was imagine my big vessels as a kind of precious object, and that they would make a shifuku in just before I put it in its crate or its box, that I have a kind of oversized choco. So I think that in that sense, I'm not going to be prejudiced against a well-known brand, because they are also creatives trying to do innovative things, wanting to remain relevant, trying to find new markets, wanting people to know them in different ways. And they also need artists to say, you don't only have to make purses. You don't only have to make purses. You can make other things. And in Tokoname, we could say, you don't only have to make sewer pipes. So if I can say to Bottega, you don't only have to make purses, and to Tokoname, you don't have to make, then there might be room for new innovation. You know? I'm not going to penalize Prada for being great. I'm going to work with Prada to make Tokoname great. Arigato.
So another question about not collaboration, but a combination. That in the last room at DJ the counter, there is kind of the banner says like a Shinto Pentecostal. So could you elaborate on that? Could you tell us about the story behind that?
So again, you know, religion is funny. I remember when I was at Documenta, my curator asked me, "Are you Christian?" And I was like, yeah, I'm Christian. She was like, "What do you mean you're Christian?" I said, "Well, I grew up in a church, and at some point I said, you know, Jesus, and it is the religion of my mom. So if you're asking me a political question about my faith, I'm gonna say, yeah. Why? Yeah, why not? Yeah, I'm Christian, sure." And she was like, in the name of Jesus, so many atrocities have happened. How could you ever live under the banner of Jesus Christ when in the name of Jesus Christ, men have been slaughtered and people have been pilgrims and your people ended up in America in the name of Jesus and they, subjugated you under this thing. I was like, oh, that is not the religion of my mom. So whatever Jesus that was, that ain't got to do with the Jesus my mama believed in, and that the doctrine that created hate and genocide has nothing to do with my mom's love and grace and ability to forgive and ability to be hospitable and generous. I don't know that Jesus, that one. I think in a similar way, I think about Shintoism. That the reason I was very interested in animism. And by respecting the power, the spirit within things, people make different decisions about how they live in the world. The example I gave is, if there's an 800-year-old tree and you're building a highway, in America, we would cut the tree and you would build the highway straight. In places that have a deep belief in the power within the tree, they would historically build around the tree. Shinto. I was interested in the ways in which betterment, beauty, the power within things could live. The way Shinto Pentecostalism was a collision between, the gods of Japan and the god of my auntie, And that, like the music that the monks perform, I'm interested in what happens when objects collide and craft abilities collide, but I'm also interested in what happens when ideologies collide, philosophies collide, and they don't quite make sense. No. It is true that people use Shintoism and Pentecostalism and Christianity to do really crazy things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, as a whole human, the ability to extract love from these texts and learn to be disciplined from these texts. The Shinto Pentecostal is the kind of ecstatic environment that I want to be in because it's part chant, part sweat. It's part chant, part ecstasy, physical, emotive ecstasy. And so I think I'm, Afro-Mingei and Shinto Pentecostal, maybe they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Talking about animism, you are the artist who creates something new, but also you are collecting so many stuff and accumulate so many things, and entire bookshelf, entire ceramic shelf, so that collecting is part of your creation. And can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, one way of thinking about it, Mami, is I would say to friends of mine in Chicago, no one's interested in a small problem. But if your problem is big enough, there's room for others to be involved in it. And when I was collecting black books, let's say, I didn't exactly know what I would do with them all. But then I was given an exhibition at the Mori Museum And I was like, oh, I can bring my second collection of black books to the Mori. And I think that I collect in faith. Not because, well, maybe I'm a hoarder, but not because I'm a hoarder, but because I think that there is some purpose that I don't fully know. There's some purpose for the appetite. And that when I look at the appetites of others who collected in the past, there's a guy named like John Hirschhorn. He collected things all over the world. He got old. And then he was living in New York and he said, hey, DC, I'd like to build a museum around these things that I've collected. And he had so much stuff that he didn't just leave it to family members. He understood that he had some other kind of responsibility. And then he was able to make a museum of modern art on the National Mall. I think that collecting things, you almost have to split yourself. Like, if I were collecting for myself as an individual alone, I think I was saturated years ago. But maybe I'm collecting for a future that I don't know. But right now, when I think about those black books, I don't think about sending them home. I think about them staying here. So maybe I've been collecting those books for Japan.
Yeah, and open for the audience, yes.
Would anyone like to ask us a question?
僕もコレクターなんでコレクションの話はすごく、感動的でした。僕も将来全部美術館にコレクション寄贈しようと思ってます。で質問なんですけども、民芸はすごくこう無名の工人の美しさを称える素晴らしいところがあるけれども、最近その別の考え方で柳が台湾とか朝鮮半島とか沖縄に対してすごくそれをこう称賛したことをオリエンタリズムというふうに批判する意見もあります。で、シアスターさんの作品ってブラックイズビューティフルとか公民権運動に根ざしていて、だけど黒人美術も西洋美術のために奉仕をしたり搾取されてきた歴史があって、そういうことを踏まえたときにアフロ民芸の立場からどう考えるか、ちょっとご意見を聞かせてください。
I think, like the word art, Mingei can be as big or as small as our humanity. Historically, Mingei did not acknowledge others who may have contributed to the power of the unknown maker. But the truth is, the Taiwanese and Korean hand is in the makeup of Mingei. In that sense, Mingei could be a pluralism. And when I would look at early issues of those Mingei periodicals, Koge might have on the cover African architecture, Peruvian ceramics, Irish drinking steins for beer. That it seemed like the first goal of Mingei was to protect the East from the West. Then a more nuanced goal over time of Mingei may have been to acknowledge the Mingei-ness of people all over the world. But that's an evolution. I think in a similar way, the Black is Beautiful movement was a philosophy that was trying to protect Black identity and culture from an impeding whiteness that was forcing Blackness to conform to something that didn't feel natural. And it was attempting to force an erasure of culture. So our first goal of Black is Beautiful may have been to protect us from whiteness, from the West, from the additional subjugation, from the problems of being a forced labor community in a country that never wanted to imagine us as equal, right? And in that, it was not perfect. The movement wasn't perfect. It had misogyny, it had gender bias, it had prosperity for some, notoriety for some, fame and fortune, but not for everybody. And then one has to decide in one's evolution. Could a great opportunity at the Mori Museum be great for me alone and all of the people who helped me make the exhibition at Mori, should they remain unnamed? And if Yanagi is named, could Yanagi have done more to name others? And if Theaster is named, could I do more to ensure that every potter that I know is also named? And so the evolution then is that Black is Beautiful, from my perspective, can no longer exclude the fact that Japan is part of my Blackness. So Black is Beautiful is a way of saying that the world is beautiful, that every encounter that I have is thickening my truth. It's enriching my truth. And man, do I feel richer as a result of the relationships that I built here in Japan.
Thank you very much. Very moved.
じゃあそちらの真ん中の女性の方お願いします。
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could elaborate on the project you started in Chicago, where you started about buying real estate and turning into like a sort of community house, because there's so many vacant houses in Japan and that's becoming a real serious problem. So I think what you're doing is so inspirational.
Okay. So, again, I didn't realize it would become important to others. The building next to me was abandoned and the water was leaking. They had stolen the pipes, the copper pipes. They had removed them so that they could make money on the copper, and the water in the basement was flooding, and it was affecting the foundation, and it was messing up my building. So I bought it to manage the problem. And maybe my interest in real estate started by trying to control a problem. And it went from trying to control a problem to an artist trying to participate in the creation of a community, to me trying to demonstrate that communities that we no longer want to live in and villages and towns that we imagine have nothing to offer, that they have so much to offer. And so after the fourth or fifth building, we thought, oh, maybe we should really think about this. Maybe we could have other kinds of change.
And we wanted to focus on culture. Like maybe friends who needed a place to stay, maybe they could stay at our place. And then maybe artists who wanted to do cool things, they could help to kind of help rebuild this community by doing interesting cultural things. And then it became 10 buildings and then 20 and then 30 buildings. But now it's a lot of buildings. I'm tired. I don't know why I did it. But now that I've kind of created a model that other people like, then I think there are other people who love real estate. But I didn't do it because I love real estate. I did it because I wanted to fix a problem that was next to me, and I love culture. So I fixed the problem and I added culture, and now I got a lot of buildings and I don't want them. So if anybody wants 40 art buildings in Chicago, raise your hand. But what it's done is it's given me all this knowledge about what it means to help, the ways in which artists and creatives can help build a great place by also being investors and owners in a place, by believing together in it and not just being tenants, but being powerful, unified groups that believe together in a place and benefit from that belief. So there are a lot of empty buildings in Tokoname, and I hope we're able to bring life to those buildings again. Kyoto, Osaka, Okinawa. I'm open. Let's renovate some buildings.
There's one project in his Chicago section that he did not build the building. There's a Kenwood Park that it's called. You bought a block of 10. Then he converted to the beautiful park. Such a beautiful park. 13 empty lots. So it's in the show. Yeah.
You know, when I think about Marfa, do you know Donald Judd's Marfa? Donald Judd was able to get money from the Manil family, from the Museum of Modern Art, from the sale of his artwork. You just do whatever you need to do. Andy Goldsworthy, you know, Michael Heiser, James Terrell, Mariko Mori. You find ways to cobble together. You dream first. How did I fund it? I dreamed. And then I talked about it. And then people helped me. And I helped myself. And when you're addicted, obsessive, you do things that are crazy. But I think that really seeing the Koide, seeing those pots by Koide. Are you going to go back to the Koide image? Sure. Thank you. Seeing this and having them go from 8 different little rooms, rooms that maybe haven't been looked at since the 1970s or the 1980s. They were just pots that were stored in the attic. And in a way, I kept them wrapped because I didn't want them to be displayed for sale. I wanted them to be displayed in honor as a kind of monument of Tokoname craftsmanship and achievement. Like, this is what a life of making looks like. And when I look at that, I think, I'm glad that Koide was obsessive and making, and I'm glad that I'm obsessive in saying yes. You know. Thank you all very much.
ありがとうございました。アフロ民芸展なんですが、アフロ民芸というコンセプトが今日のトークにもありました通り、シアスタゲイさんの、これまでの歩みの中で出会ったさまざまな出会いで成り立っている、でこれからも変化していくものだと思います。で異質なもの、自分と異なるものと出会った時にそれを否定するのではなくて共感するっていうことがそのアフロ民芸の根幹にあると思います。会期は9月の1日まで始まったばかりなので、皆さんぜひ、この展覧会の素晴らしさと自分で言うのもあれですけどシアスタゲイさんの作品の素晴らしさを伝えて、たくさんの人に来ていただければと思います。はい、本日はどうもありがとうございました。シアスタゲイさんありがとうございました。